To effect great change, you first have to believe. You have to believe that change is possible. You have to believe that you can make a difference.
It is from these beliefs that the Southern Center for Human Rights was born.
The Southern Center for Human Rights was founded in 1976 by people who believed that equal justice under law should be a reality.
And we're determined to fight against the societal barriers that eliminated the promise of equal justice.
For 40 years, the Southern Center has tirelessly worked to transform the criminal justice system in the region that blatantly turned justice on its head, the Deep South.
Valuing human life is at the forefront of the Southern Center's opposition to the death penalty.
We've argued 5 cases before the United States Supreme Court, challenging ineffective assistance of counsel and racial bias in jury selection.
But more importantly, we never give up on our clients and fight to save their lives as fiercely as we would save our own.
We do not tolerate human rights abuses in prisons and jails.
SCHR's class action litigation has reformed and, where necessary, closed jails and prisons throughout the South that have violated the human rights of people incarcerated.
We vigorously defend the constitutional right to counsel.
There will be no statewide public defender system in Georgia without the 5-year effort and 6 lawsuits brought by the Southern Center.
We continue to be the sole organization litigating to enforce the constitutional right to counsel for poor people accused of crimes throughout Georgia.
The Southern Center for Human Rights is sounding the alarm on the criminalization of poverty. We bring lawsuits to end practices like debtors' prisons. We've exposed and dismantled private probation extortion, illegal fines and fees, and other profit-seeking practices that criminalize people simply for being poor.
We work to end injustice whenever, wherever, and however it exists.
We do not do this work because it's popular.
We do this work because we believe.
We believe in the power of individuals to collectively make a difference.
We believe that justice is not justice if it is not equal.
We believe that everyone deserves dignity, respect, and compassion.
We believe that our children deserve to inherit a world that recognizes and values the humanity of every individual.
We believe the words of our hero Frederick Douglass are true. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground.
We believe in agitating for equal justice.
For 40 years, your support has fueled tremendous change in the criminal justice system in the South.
And with your partnership, we will continue working to reimagine equal justice. Thank you for believing with us.
Thank you for believing in us.
Together, we will reimagine equal justice and create the change we want to see.
Greetings to you all. We are so honored to be asked to participate in this celebration of Sarah's 20th anniversary at the Southern Center for Human Rights. My name is Louise. I'm her mother. This is her dad, Emil.
Well, Sarah was the greatest gift we received in our early married life. She is our first-born daughter. Sarah exhibited her activism very early through a very challenging personality. She became the spokesperson for her siblings, friends, and some family members. Sarah developed an understanding of the ailments that affected certain members of our society. She became aware of the extreme poverty and the treatment of the underprivileged. That was the motive for her to develop all the talents to try to tackle as many of these problems. She established relationships and built bridges to overcome hurdles of communication with both the underprivileged community as well as those in charge of the establishment, with the hope of helping the latter to understand the problems and how we can improve the situation. Sarah's work became more clear at the Southern Center of Human Rights. She and her team of very dedicated workers are the shining bright star in the dark night that have covered the ailments in our society: poverty, racism, the indigent defense, as well as all the unfortunate issues that have affected the underprivileged. We are very proud of you, Sarah, as well as your team, and your achievements have been great, all of you, and we will continue to support you, and we wish you the best always.
Sarah, this past year I've watched you in awe as you can transition from being teacher mom to participating in very serious and important meetings without batting an eyelid. Congratulations, you're the best. And by the way, did you start at the Southern Center when you were 10 years old? Because you know, I'm only 39 after all. Love you, so proud, congratulations.
And I won't tell you how old I am then.
Welcome to the Southern Center for Human Rights Justice Taking Root Benefit. To open the show, we'll hear music from Caroline Aiken.
Cold steel and concrete, fluorescent sunrise. Soon you'll forget me. I'll be the days gone by. Dreaming, endlessly dreaming. Coastline is gleaming. Sunsets down low in the sky. Then I will be long gone. Follow the sun all the way home. Whisper of freedom blows in the wind. Broken wings heal, and I'll fly again. I'll fly again. I'll fly again. Warm summer sunlight pours through the window. Sometimes I get low, can't see your face anymore. So long since I got a letter. One day I'll be better. One day I'll walk out that door. Then I will be long gone. Follow the sun all the way home. Whisper of freedom blows in the wind. Broken wings heal, and I'll fly again. I'll fly again. I'll fly again. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then watch me unravel, come completely undone. Stare while I burn up in flames underneath the red sun. I cried out for mercy, only angels heard. Found me there in the ashes, call me firebird. Then I will be long gone. Follow the sun all the way home. Whisper of freedom blows in the wind. Broken wings heal, and I'll fly again. I'll fly again. I'll fly again, yeah.
Good evening, and welcome to the Southern Center for Human Rights Annual Justice Taking Root Benefit. I am Terica Redfield Gansey, and I have the honor of serving as SCHR's Deputy Director. At SCHR, we're working for equality, dignity, and justice for people impacted by the criminal legal system in the Deep South. SCHR fights for a world free from mass incarceration, the death penalty, the criminalization of poverty, and racial injustice. We are delighted to have you here with us tonight. You could be doing any number of things, but you chose to spend your time with us as we celebrate our honorees and our executive director. We are tremendously grateful to you. I want to especially acknowledge our sponsors who made tonight's event possible. Thank you. Bringing you greetings tonight on behalf of Verizon, a luminary sponsor of tonight's event, is my friend and a woman of conviction, Michelle Arrington.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Arrington, and I help manage Verizon's local engagement here in Georgia. Verizon is proud to serve as one of the sponsors for the Southern Center for Human Rights Justice Taking Root Gala. The work that the Southern Center performs to provide equality, dignity, and justice for people impacted in the criminal justice system is instrumental in ensuring the legal system is used as a tool to hold individuals and communities accountable to each other. It is when we are united on a path towards justice that we can achieve equitable results for all. This is why it's so exciting to support the mission of the Southern Center for Human Rights as they fight against mass incarceration, the criminalization of poverty, and racial injustice. This mission aligns with Verizon's commitment to become a force for change and to live up to the highest ideals of equality and justice. It is why Verizon has invested over $10 million with organizations to address issues of inequality and injustice throughout the country. Internally, Verizon has put an action into practice by implementing company-wide forums, discussions, resources, and leadership trainings focused on equity through our employee resource groups and our diversity, equity, and inclusion councils. Our legal and public policy teams have been active in raising awareness of the system challenges and advocating for reform. This includes sponsoring, supporting, and participating in conferences and discussions in criminal justice reform around the nation. Additionally, we've taken positions on bipartisan state and federal legislation designed to address reform in the criminal justice system. And members of our legal team serve as volunteers and provide pro bono representation to individuals in the criminal justice system. Change happens one step at a time, and it starts with all of us. At Verizon, we know that the fight for racial justice, equality, and dignity creates a more sustainable future. By supporting the Southern Center for Human Rights, we support equality and justice, and this is what a healthy and wholesome society is rooted upon. Congratulations to all of the honorees tonight, to Sarah on her 20th anniversary serving as Executive Director for the Southern Center for Human Rights. Have a great evening, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been quite a year for all of us, both personally and professionally. The racially motivated attacks on communities of color, a pandemic that continues to rage, attacks on voting rights. The devastation is wide and deep, and it is felt across generations. Through it all, we are sustained by our histories, our values, our lived experiences that motivate us on the really hard days. They drive us when we're tired, when things seem hopeless, and when we want to cry. And so it is that all of us at SCHR continue to advocate like our children's futures depend on it, like the health of our communities is at stake, like justice demands it. I am pleased to share just a glimpse of the important issues we've been working on over the recent weeks and months. Continues to see shocking levels of apathy and cruelty in prisons and jails and in the treatment of people who are directly impacted by the system. We recently wrote a letter to Lee Arrendale State Prison demanding changes to numerous unconstitutional and unconscionable practices, including shackling pregnant and postpartum women, allowing women to live in disgusting, unsanitary conditions, and, unfortunately, even more. One woman incarcerated at the prison delivered her baby by emergency cesarean section after 29 hours of labor. She experienced multiple complications during labor, including an inability to dilate, a drop in her baby's heart rate, and abnormal levels of pain that required not one but 2 epidurals. After delivery, she was shaking and sweating so severely that she struggled to hold her baby, who was taken from her soon thereafter. Less than 48 hours after giving birth, she was placed in a transport van with her ankles in iron shackles for the 71-mile trip back to Arrendale. Over the course of the next week at Arrendale, she experienced excruciating pain, vomited green fluid, and developed sepsis, a potentially life-threatening condition. But despite her poor condition, officers placed her in iron cuffs around her ankles and wrists and a metal chain around her abdomen to transport her to 12 miles to the nearest hospital. At the hospital, physicians diagnosed her with excessive water in her lungs, fluid building up around her heart, and an abdominal infection that required immediate surgery. She was taken that day via ambulance to an intensive care unit at another hospital where she had surgery and remained for the next 12 days. 19 staples were needed to close the large surgical opening in her stomach. 4 days after returning to prison, still less than 4 weeks after giving birth, she had to be taken back to the hospital because she had diminished lung capacity in her left lung and was having trouble breathing. Before placing her in the transport van, an officer placed iron cuffs around her feet, shackled her hands around her waist, and placed a metal chain below her breast near the staples in her abdomen, causing her great pain. She asked the officer not to shackle her, but he threatened not to take her to the hospital unless she was shackled. Her story is just one example of repeated violations of not just the Constitution and Georgia law, but also of human dignity and respect. We hope our letter will be sufficient to get the officials to do the right thing and correct the inhumane practices that are occurring at the prison. But we stay ready to challenge injustice, and we are prepared to take additional legal steps if they refuse to treat women in their care humanely. The story of Sergeant Jerry Lett, a decorated veteran, former firefighter, and dedicated father who has led a life of service, is another instance of almost unimaginable cruelty. Mr. Lett served his country with distinction for nearly a decade through multiple deployments. After his return to Alabama, Sergeant Lett served the state of Alabama in the National Guard and the city of Dothan as a firefighter, where he performed rescue operations for people stuck in burning cars and high-rise buildings. He received multiple commendations over the course of his service. But following a struggle with addiction, he was arrested for a drug offense and incarcerated. Throughout his incarceration, Sergeant Lett maintained a perfect institutional record. SCHR represented Mr. Lett at his parole hearing in September of 22, where in recognition of his military service and stellar institutional record, the Alabama Board granted parole and returned Mr. Lett to his loving family and community in October. But tragically, Sergeant Lett is now in danger of being sent back to prison, not because he did anything wrong, but because the Alabama Board of Pardon and Paroles purportedly made a technical error in setting his parole hearing last year. At a hearing on April 1st, the Alabama Parole Board did the unthinkable and revoked Mr. Lett's parole, immediately issuing a warrant for his arrest. We filed a complaint and an emergency petition for writ of certiorari, along with a motion for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. The judge granted our TRO and temporarily enjoined the Bureau of Pardons and Paroles and the Alabama Department of Corrections from arresting Sergeant Lett. Had the judge not granted the TRO, Sergeant Lett would have been incarcerated on his birthday. Instead, he is still free, and we will continue to work to ensure he remains free. These stories signal that injustice knows no bounds, but neither does our resolve to end it. We engage in a mighty struggle, a struggle that makes us tired, and there are sometimes setbacks and disappointments along the way. My baby boy asked me recently, "Mommy, what do you do when you lose?" He hates losing, so he was trying to figure out what's the best response to a loss. And I told him, you assess the situation, learn from it, and try again. He then asked, well, why don't you just quit? And I told him that there are some things that you have to want so badly that you persevere no matter what. You feel it in your bones, you believe it in your spirit, that the goal you seek is possible. You can see the beauty in your vision. At SCHR, we feel the need for justice, fairness, equality, and dignity in our bones, our spirits, and so do so many of the people we serve who keep going, who continue to raise their voices to demand change, who hold on to hope even under the profound weight of oppression. We press on because the struggle also gives us hope. Hope knowing that we are part of a growing coalition of individuals and organizations who refuse to move aside and let injustice reign. In this video, we lift up some of these partnerships and the change that we are creating together.
Founded in 1976 by ministers, activists, and lawyers, the Southern Center for Human Rights has long held to the words of Dr. King,
that our nation must undergo a radical revolution of values.
One that calls into question the fairness and justice of our past and present.
For 45 years, we have answered Dr. King's call, working to challenge a criminal legal system in the Deep South
that devalues equality, dignity, and justice.
In this past decade, Georgia has removed more people from voter lists due to felony conviction than any other state.
The Southern Center works to uproot the Jim Crow practice of felony disenfranchisement by actively confronting the remnants of slavery in the South
and empowering the most intimidated and suppressed voters in Georgia.
Before the 2020 elections, we sent over 11,000 absentee ballot requests into county jails,
making it possible for people jailed while awaiting trial to cast their ballots in the national and runoff elections.
We have defended the rights of those challenging voter suppression under the Gold Dome and beyond.
We advocate for people who are silenced and ignored.
The Southern Center's litigation has unearthed abuses of power and shone a light on the chaotic, dangerous conditions in prisons and jails.
We honor the dignity of those locked inside by carrying the voices of people who have experienced these torturous conditions out of isolation
and into action to end the practice of solitary confinement. We continue to litigate and advocate to prevent new death sentences and executions
and to abolish the death penalty once and for all.
We grow, empower, and learn from coalitions of committed change makers.
The Southern Center has joined in coalition with Communities Over Cages to dismantle Atlanta's over-reliance on incarceration and to combat efforts to walk back bail reform.
Because we know that caging people and then requiring them to pay for their freedom does not make us safer.
We honor a strong, revolutionary Black organizing history in Georgia and recognize that city and rural Georgians alike are more capable of determining for themselves what they need.
Grounded in the belief that social transformation begins on the local level, we have partnered with the Georgia NAACP to form Just Georgia,
a new coalition to address the needs of Georgians impacted by systems of oppression and to shift interactions between Black people and the state.
At the Southern Center, we know that a criminal legal system built on a foundation of racial violence and oppression will always resist equality, suppress dignity, and sidestep true justice.
We do this work
because we believe in our power to effect change. We do this work
because our clients trust us to hold their stories, struggles, and joys in a world that would rather they be forgotten.
We do this work
through tears and anger because we know, in the words of Arundhati Roy, that another world is not only possible, but on its way.
We choose this work
in hope and optimism.
For 45 years, your support has allowed us to stand firm in our values and to agitate for systemic change in the Deep South that reverberates throughout our nation.
Thank you for choosing this work with us.
We choose this work in hope and optimism. Your support means that we don't have to hesitate when we uncover injustice. We can move boldly forward knowing that we are backed by people who are committed to ending injustice. Systems do not change because we wish they would. They change because we demand it. Tearing down systems and practices and creating communities that thrive cannot be done in a vacuum. It takes all of us to bring our experiences, talents, and resources to the struggle. Thank you for believing that better is possible. And because you believe that better is possible, we ask that you give at any time during tonight's events by using our text to give information at the bottom of your screen, or by visiting www.schr.org/donate to make a donation in any amount. Everyone who donates any amount during this event and until midnight Eastern tonight will be entered to win a 5-night stay at an apartment in Paris, France, and 2 airline tickets sponsored by Nathan Hartman of Hartman Private Law. And now, we will move into the awards portion of our program. We are here to celebrate the righteous ones, the people who ceaselessly work to create positive change in Georgia and beyond. I'm excited, and I hope you are too. A vanguard is one who stands at the forefront of an action or movement. There is no doubt that the Georgia State NAACP stands at the forefront of the movement for justice in Georgia. Here to present SCHR's 2021 Vanguard Award is SCHR's Community Engagement and Movement Building Council, Tiffany Williams Roberts.
In our work, it is so important to have strong and courageous partners. It is even more important to have trusted friends. We are so fortunate to have found that in the Georgia NAACP. The world knows the NAACP is one of the country's first human rights organizations, co-founded by my hero, Ida B. Wells. They centered the needs of Black Americans during very dangerous times. Beyond their slogan of being the oldest, largest, baddest, and boldest, they are indeed our friends. Under Reverend Charles White's leadership in the early 2000s, the Georgia NAACP partnered with SCHR in advocating for a public defender system in Georgia for the first time. They provided testimony to the Chief Justice's Commission, Blue Ribbon Commission on Indigent Defense and Legislature, and co-organized rallies and press conferences, successfully demanding the passage of the Georgia Indigent Defense Act. Under Ed DuBose's leadership, the Georgia NAACP prioritized advocacy against the death penalty, specifically lifting up Troy Davis's case. From about 2007 through Troy's devastating execution in 2011, the Georgia NAACP, SCHR, and Amnesty International worked with many others to shine a light on Troy's case through engaging nearly every sector of public life and supporting Troy's family. Under Francis Johnson's leadership, the Georgia NAACP partnered with SCHR to educate community about the Judicial Qualifications Commission and its incredible work to remove bad judges. We fought a constitutional amendment that would gut the JQC. In that instance, we did not successfully block the amendment, but the fight itself was a win because the work was so important. The lawsuit challenging the City of LaGrange's inhumane practice of conditioning access to vital utility services on the payment of court fines never would have happened if it wasn't for the Georgia NAACP. According to our research, 90% of the residents harmed by the court debt policy were Black. Because Georgia and Troup County NAACP sounded the alarm, this racist policy was dragged out of the shadows onto the cover of a local paper and ultimately into federal court. Because of Georgia NAACP's courage and persistence, the court debt policy ended last year. When Ahmaud Arbery was killed last year in Glenn County, Georgia, the Georgia NAACP President James Woodall worked with SCHR, Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, the New Georgia Project, Black Voters Matter, Working Families Party, Beacon Hill Alliance for Black Human Rights, and organizer Tamika Middleton to form Just Georgia, a coalition committed to supporting communities fighting state-sanctioned violence across the state, especially in Southeast Georgia. Under the hashtag Georgia's Got Georgia, Just Georgia confronts all systems promoting violence, from fighting voter suppression to the successful repeal of our citizens' arrest law. The coalition has proven to be a source of inspiration and strength for an organizing community still reeling from the seemingly endless stream of violence against Black people at the hands of the state. We are eternally grateful for the perseverance, solidarity, vision, and compassion of the Georgia NAACP, the oldest, largest, baddest, and boldest. So it is truly my pleasure to present the Southern Center for Human Rights Vanguard Award to the Georgia NAACP. Accepting on the organization's behalf is my friend, President James Woodall.
On behalf of the Georgia NAACP, we thank the Southern Center for Human Rights for this very distinguished award that not only represents our organization, but thousands upon thousands of Georgians all throughout this state. When we look throughout the beauty of our state, we see amazing people from Statesboro, to Waycross, to Trutland County, to Atlanta, to Blue Ridge, to Elberton. In the scripture, according to the prophet Micah 6:8, it says, "What does the good Lord require of us? But to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God." When we look at the mission and the vision of our organization, that is exactly what we stand for. To be able to walk side by side, not in front of nor behind, but side by side of everyday Georgians, to be able to deliver the promises that our Constitution and our very humanity affords each and every one of us. So again, on behalf of the NAACP, we stand ready to continue to fight, to stand, to speak out, but ultimately to serve our communities, because that is truly what justice looks like. Thank you so much, and may God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Georgia.
Thank you, Reverend Woodall, Reverend Charles White, Reverend Francis Johnson, and Edward DeBose, and the entire Georgia NAACP membership for all you do for so many. We are proud to honor you tonight. A luminary is one who inspires and influences others. There have been so many times over the years that we have been inspired by Bondurant's partnership and our work towards equality, dignity, and justice. Here to present SCHR's 2021 Luminary Award is the Managing Attorney for SCHR's Capital Litigation Unit, Patrick Mulvaney.
Good evening. It's a great privilege to present our Luminary Award to Bondurant, Mixson, and Elmore. We give this award to a person or a group that inspires us and inspires others to work toward equality, dignity, and justice in our criminal legal system. The team at Bondurant fits that description perfectly. Through pro bono representation, they have worked to protect the right to counsel, to shine a light on the problems in our death penalty system, and to challenge race discrimination in criminal cases. In the early 2000s, when Georgia was facing a crisis with respect to violations of the right to counsel, Emmett Bondurant took a leading role, along with SCHR, in the successful effort to establish a statewide public defender system. In the years since, the work has continued, with many lawyers from the Bondurant firm helping to protect the public defender system from attacks. In the context of the death penalty, Bondurant lawyers have stepped up time and time again to advocate for fairness, dignity, and transparency. In 2013, Sachin Varghese took the lead in challenging Georgia's Lethal Injection Secrecy Act. And today, Ronan Doherty, Ben Fox, and Michael Jones represent journalists in an Open Records Act case because the Georgia Department of Corrections has refused to disclose execution information to which the public is entitled. With respect to race discrimination, I cannot overstate the importance of the Bondurant firm's work in recent years. In 2018, our office and the Georgia Innocence Project were representing Johnny Gates, a black man who had spent more than 40 years in prison for a conviction from Columbus. In the course of the case, we discovered overwhelming evidence of race discrimination by the prosecutors at Mr. Gates' 1977 trial. The state's reaction to this discovery was to try to use procedural arguments to prevent the evidence of discrimination from being presented. Bondurant lawyers, including Emmett and Sachin, then filed an amicus brief on behalf of civil rights leaders, former judges, and former prosecutors, urging the court to consider the evidence of discrimination. Fortunately, the evidence was allowed, and the hearing really showed how severely race discrimination undermines the integrity of our system. The court found not only that the state had engaged in race discrimination at Mr. Gates' trial, but also that DNA evidence showed that Mr. Gates did not commit the crime for which he served 43 years in prison. We're thrilled that Mr. Gates was released from prison last year, and we're extremely grateful to the Bondurant attorneys for their support in the case and their efforts to ensure that evidence of race discrimination is not ignored by our courts. These examples are just the tip of the iceberg. For every effort I mentioned, there are many more I left out. To the entire team at Bondurant, Mixson, and Elmore, thank you for standing up for equality, dignity, and justice, and congratulations on the 2021 Southern Center for Human Rights Luminary Award.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ronan Doherty, and I'm a partner at Bondurant, Mixson, and Elmore. And on behalf of the firm, I want to say that we are grateful and honored to receive the Southern Center's Luminary Award. But we are also humbled because for so many years, it has been the Southern Center that has provided the light and shown the way. Advocates like Steve Bright, Sarah Totonchi, Patrick Mulvaney, Sarah Garrity, and Marissa McCall Dodson have worked tirelessly in the courts and in the public square to push and prod us all towards a world that is more just and more equitable. The center has always represented the most marginalized among us, often fighting for their clients' very lives and always fighting for their dignity. In society's darkest places, the Southern Center has been a consistent and insistent source of light. When Emmett Bondurant founded our firm, public service and pro bono litigation were at the heart of his vision. In 1964, at the ripe old age of 26, Emmett argued Westbury versus Sanders in the Supreme Court and helped establish the principle of one person, one vote. 55 years later, in 2019, Emmett was back at the Supreme Court to argue against political gerrymandering. And as today's headlines confirm, the struggle for voting rights continues. The firm is committed to stay in that fight. Emmett also worked with the Southern Center to reform Georgia's indigent defense system. Together, they helped produce legislation to uphold the promise and enforce the obligation announced in Gideon versus Wainwright, that even poor people should have a lawyer when facing criminal charges. Those of us who have been lucky enough to work at the firm Emmett founded have tried to follow his example of public service. Generations of Bondurant lawyers have taken on pro bono cases to provide legal help to those who need it and to shine light on injustice. Over the last 4 decades, Bondurant lawyers have fought to free innocent clients from prison, from death row, and even from Guantanamo Bay. And we have been proud to work with the Southern Center on countless other cases. My colleagues, Sachin and Michael, will tell you about a couple of those cases now. As we say thank you. Thank you to the Southern Center for this award, and thank you for the opportunity to work together wherever we can join forces to right a wrong.
Good evening. My name is Sachin Varghese, and I'm a partner at Bondurant, Mixson, and Elmore. BME is grateful to have had the opportunity to support and partner with the Southern Center in its fight for justice. As you all know, the Southern Center does incredible work to right injustice, to save lives, and to represent those who often go unrepresented. In particular, its fight to end the scourge of the death penalty has been tireless, and I'm grateful the firm has had the opportunity to assist the Southern Center in that work. A few years ago, my colleagues and I at BME had the opportunity to represent Warren Lee Hill, an intellectually disabled death row inmate, in challenging Georgia's Lethal Injection Secrecy Act. Unfortunately, that challenge was unsuccessful, and Georgia used its power to execute Mr. Hill. However, more recently, we also had the opportunity to support the Southern Center in its fight to free Johnny Lee Gates. Johnny spent 43 years in prison, many on death row, for a crime he did not commit. His case involved profound race discrimination and other prosecutorial misconduct. Last May, Johnny was finally able to walk out of prison a free man. For me personally, I doubt I will do anything better in my legal career than helping to free an innocent man from prison, and I'm grateful to the Southern Center for that opportunity.
But that's the sort of important work that the Southern Center does every single day. They fight to free the innocent and to protect minorities and those without financial resources from the harsh realities of our criminal justice system. It's the necessary work that makes the moral arc of our universe bend towards justice in time to meet the urgent needs of those whose desperate pleas for help have gone unheeded for far, far too long. BME has been honored to partner with the Southern Center to advance these shared priorities over the decades. And we're delighted to continue that partnership today as we continue to fight against lethal injection secrecy and the Department of Corrections' decision to withhold, in response to Open Records Act requests from reporter Max Blau, documents that reflect the state's importation and use of phenobarbital. My name is Michael Jones, and we are Bondurant, Mixson, and Elmore. We're deeply grateful to work together with the Southern Center, and we're honored and humbled to receive the Luminary Award this evening. Thank you very much, and we're excited to continue our important partnership.
Congratulations, Ronan, Emmett, Sachin, Michael, and the entire team at Bondurant, Mixson, and Elmore on this well-deserved honor. The final portion of our event is very special to us. This is our opportunity to celebrate SCHR Executive Director Sara J. Totonchi's 20th anniversary at SCHR. Sara leads SCHR with passion and grace. She is a thought leader and change agent whose leadership and judgment are recognized and respected nationally. We are proud to learn from, lean on, and fight injustice together with Sara every day. And tonight, we get to show her love for all the years she's dedicated to supporting and uplifting SCHR's mission and being an ally of the people we serve. I can't see the chat from here, but I hope you are joining us in sending lots of love Sara's way tonight. A giant among giants, a leader among leaders, a powerful, powerful woman who looks fear and tolerance and injustice in the eye and says, "Not today." That person is the incomparable Stacey Abrams. Tonight, Ms. Abrams is joining us in celebrating our honorees and our executive director, her close friends. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome the founder and leader of Fair Fight and Fair Fight Action, Stacey Abrams.
Hello to everyone coming together for the Southern Center for Human Rights annual benefit reception, Justice Taking Root. And congratulations to the groups being honored this evening for serving as leaders in the march towards equal justice under the law. I am particularly delighted to celebrate and honor my dear friend and our executive director, Sara Totonchi, for her 20 extraordinary years at the Southern Center. You know, we met in the Georgia House of Representatives during a judiciary non-civil hearing. It was my first year in the legislature, my first true opportunity to understand how critical the center's voice could be. I recall passing notes and offering amendments to make what seemed like small changes to devastating bills. The author of those notes, Sara Totonchi. But more importantly, I remember marveling at her deep capacity for faith that we could improve a system that had not earned such trust. What initially struck me as her naivete revealed itself as a cunning, sharp, deep understanding of process and people. When Sara testified, even the most conservative members silenced their phones and sometimes their prejudices, because they knew that she spoke up for sons and daughters, nieces and nephews, parents and children tangled in a criminal justice system that had to be held accountable for justice to be real. Over the next 11 years, my routine became 1, read the bill, 2, ask Sara what she thought, and 3, do what Sara said. Never failed. From juvenile justice to sentencing reform, to restricting private probation, to envisioning a humane system of confinement, there is no fight, no battle, no war for right where Sara and the Southern Center are on the wrong side. And we are all the better if we are there with them. The Southern Center for Human Rights and Sara Totonchi's leadership guides the missions of equality, justice, and dignity for people impacted by the criminal legal system in the Deep South, eliminating mass incarceration and eviscerating the criminalization of poverty. These are ambitious, fantastical goals, but I know that together it will be done. And I know that as long as Sara and the Southern Center are in the fight, it will be done right.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams, for being with us tonight. Your presence and your words are energizing and inspirational. Giving remarks on behalf of the entire SCHR staff is SCHR Senior Counsel, Sara Garrity.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to say a few words to introduce our Executive Director, Sara Totonchi. My reverence for Sara goes way back, as we went to high school together, and I have known Sara since I was 16 years old. Even then, I admired Sara as an independent thinker and an iconoclast in the best sense of the word. I have now had the honor of working with Sara for almost 2 decades. I could not be more proud of the renowned thought leader and social justice visionary she has become. When I think of the qualities I most admire in Sara, I think of her resolve and her perseverance, her powers of persuasion. I think of the boldness of her optimism, her sense of humor, and her vast love for family and friends, the Southern Center, the people we represent, and our colleagues. Sara carries with her a vision for a world in which all people in the criminal legal system are treated with dignity, humanity, and full citizenship. She inspires that vision in others wherever she goes. I also think of Sara's bravery. The Georgia we live in today feels a lot different than the Georgia of 25 years ago. Sara Totonchi was ringing the alarm about the travesties wrought by our legal system at Georgia's Capitol all those years ago, at a time when to do so could feel lonely and isolating, when the expression of the values we hold at the Southern Center were often met with derision and hostility. I think of all the years Sara spent at the Capitol advocating for people who are incarcerated, telling hard truths to people who needed to hear them. It takes a special confidence and courage to excel in that environment, which Sara did, building credibility and power. Another thing I admire about Sara, she does not suffer fools gladly. She tolerates no BS from anyone, and yet she has the most superior sense of diplomacy I have ever seen. Sara has a way of speaking frankly, but doing so without pushing others away. Our collective vision of equality and justice is lodged in the minds and hearts of many an unlikely ally because of her authenticity and ability to communicate with people in all walks of life. People of all political persuasions know her work and admire it. I'm grateful to Sara's vision in many respects, but in particular for how she has centered the destructive force of racism in the work of the Southern Center. Never letting us forget that structural racism is at the heart of what we fight against is the reason why our institutions treat people as shamefully as they often do. Those of you watching this likely know how Sara champions the values of compassion and respect for all people in the Center's outward-facing work. What you might not know is how genuinely those values are reflected by Sara towards her colleagues. Sara is the most brilliant manager of people I have ever encountered. She lifts up, inspires, and motivates us to do our best work. We are a staff of many people with different backgrounds, ages, strengths. Each is encouraged to shine in their individual way and to their best potential. Sara celebrates our victories with a bullhorn, and she is at our side in our defeats. I have never, not in 20 years, been on the cusp of a hearing or a big deadline when Sara was not there at my side saying, "How can I help? How can I be supportive?" I am often in awe of Sara's energy, which is boundless. After a full day of working with our staff, speaking on panels, talking to foundation leaders, meeting with legislators, after work you might find her serving on a nonprofit board, hosting an elaborate Zoom baby shower for a colleague, and then finishing the latest 2 books relevant to our work. All true examples. That's Sara T. I've been admonished to be brief, but there is so much more I could say in praise of Sara's accomplishments, her integrity, her exuberance, and her depth of character. For now, I offer my congratulations, my admiration, and my love to Sara for her years of service to the Southern Center and for making our organization the powerful force for social justice that it is today.
Thank you so much to my dear friend and longtime co-conspirator, Sara Garrity, for her incredibly generous remarks. As some of you may know, Sara G has been my mentor and inspiration for most of my life, starting at age 14. Sara, it has been a true gift to have known and worked side by side with you all these years. I was hired in 2001 by our legendary former director, Steve Bright. Prior to that, I was working at the Georgia Commission on Family Violence. It was there that I learned how to translate my activism into public policy and legislative advocacy. Steve had posted a job announcement for a fundraising position, and though I was not qualified to do it, I was so moved by the work of the Southern Center that I applied anyway, and I got an interview. At my interview, I remember talking and laughing with this extraordinary person whose charisma and passion lit me up. The interview ended with Steve saying in his booming voice, "Well, you're great, but you're not qualified for this position." But he went on to say that he had something else in mind. He was launching a campaign to transform Georgia's broken down, busted up system for providing lawyers for people accused of crimes, and he needed someone who knew the legislature to help run it. He created out of whole cloth a position for me, changing my life forever when he named me the first public policy director at the Southern Center. 2 years, 5 lawsuits, and hundreds of community meetings later, the Southern Center and our coalition partners celebrated the passage of the 2003 Georgia Indigent Defense Act, which created a public defender system in Georgia for the first time. I remember the day the legislation blessedly passed, weeping tears of joy in my car as I left the Capitol. And on the radio was the Grateful Dead's anthem, Touch of Grey, with the chorus singing, "We will get by. We will survive." In that moment, I knew I was here for this. While this is my 20th anniversary, it is also the 45th anniversary of the Southern Center for Human Rights. We are both officially middle-aged. We have changed tremendously as an organization over these 2 decades of my tenure. We have grown, and in 2021, we are cresting 40 staff members, the largest we've ever been. Many of our team members have stayed on for more than a decade themselves and have become some of the nation's leading civil rights and capital defense attorneys and investigators. Together, we work every day in service of our vision to build together a world that is free from mass incarceration, free from the death penalty, free from the criminalization of poverty, and free from racial injustice. One thing I am struck by is that while the Southern Center's commitment to our longtime clients and causes persists, we continue to evolve and expand to meet the endless needs of this moment. And that can be hard to do when you're middle-aged and steeped in your ways. A part of our growth that I am personally extremely proud of is that of our public policy unit. For over 10 years, it was a unit of 1, but it has now grown to 6+ people who are leading not only the Southern Center, but our state and nation in this urgent moment for racial justice. A question I get asked with some frequency is what keeps me in this work over these many years? My answer, always, is that I am a rebel at heart, and I love when the underdog wins. When I look back over the last 20 years, there are so many moments where, against all odds, we won. And by we, I don't just mean the Southern Center. I mean our clients, our partners, and our communities at large. Oh, if you only could have been there the day our coalition won bail reform in the city of Atlanta, or the day we welcomed home our friend and former client, Tony Amadeo, whose first stop after leaving prison, having served 38 years, was our office. And of course, there are no sweeter words than not guilty, especially in the case of City Commissioner Olivia Pearson, who was maliciously prosecuted for verbally assisting a first-time voter. And yet, there are also so many examples of loss that will weigh on my heart for the rest of my life. I want to say some of their names in their honor and memory. I remember our client, Wallace Buck Fugate, who was executed by the state of Georgia in all of our names in 2002, and Troy Davis, my friend, an innocent man who we executed in 2011. I think of Rhonda McLean, a loving, dedicated mother who died of a broken heart following the murder of her son Damon, who was in prison. I lift up the life of Chantrice Murray, who was a beloved sister and friend, who died last summer in prison, days before she was to be released. The great Lebanese-American poet Khalil Gibran wrote in his seminal work, The Prophet, about joy and sorrow, and his belief that one can't live without the other. He wrote, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed by knives? Some of you say, joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, no, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy." I love this framework for our work. The reality is that so much of our work is truly, as Gibran said, suspended between sorrow and joy. The fact that Jimmy Metters, an Army veteran, spent 30 years on death row before being granted clemency 6 hours before his scheduled execution is almost too much to bear. But in the same breath, I must declare that there is simply no better moment than receiving the news of clemency, that his life has been spared, that mercy and grace have prevailed. On that day, as Jimmy continued to live when he was scheduled to die, we drank cheap champagne in our office, stared at each other in disbelief, and wept tears of joy. I am so grateful to my dear friends and community that have supported me every step of the way. I especially want to honor and thank my parents and my siblings for all their love and support. And I definitely want to love on my boys, my husband John and my 6.5-year-old son Max. They keep me humble, balanced, and on my toes in all the right ways. Most of all, I want to send this love letter to my coworkers, the staff of the Southern Center, past and present, but especially present. I cannot adequately express what being one of us has meant to me. You have shown me that miracles are possible because you believe in our world's potential. And while you work miracles, you are kind and support each other through wins and losses, through joy and sorrow. You demonstrate daily true friendship, respect, admiration, and appreciation for each other. Even when we hurt each other, I see humility, introspection, patience, growth, and grace. You show up in full every day. Your work is about solidarity and love. You move me and you inspire me to be the best person I can be. I love you all, and I thank you for allowing me these moments of reflection and celebration.
Congratulations, Sara, on reaching this milestone at SCHR. What a remarkable 20 years it's been, and there's still more to come. Closing out tonight's program is the president of SCHR's Board of Directors, James Kwok. James is a law professor, a best-selling author, an entrepreneur, and a force for equality, dignity, and justice in the criminal legal system.
We've come to the end of another wonderful evening. Please join me in thanking all of the people who helped make this event possible, beginning with our generous sponsors. The incomparable Stacey Abrams, thank you for being with us this evening. And Deputy Director Terka Ganzi and the staff of the Southern Center for Human Rights. I'd like to congratulate this evening's honorees, the Georgia NAACP and Bondurant, Mixson, and Elmore. Thank you for everything you've done in the struggle for justice and everything you continue to do. I want to say a word about Sara Totonchi. I've known Sara for 8 years now, and during that time, she's had an extraordinary impact on the Southern Center and on the nationwide fight for justice in the criminal legal system. Under Sara's leadership, the Southern Center has seen immense growth in our staff, in our profile, in the scope of our work, and in our impact. And through it all, Sara has preserved the organization's core value of utter dedication to and respect for our clients. Sara, I'm proud to count you as my friend. I send you my love, and I hope that we can work together for many more years. This is the third time that we've gotten together this way since the pandemic began. And for the most part, the last 14 months have been pretty bleak. This spring, there are some signs of hope. The vaccination rollout is opening up the possibility that the pandemic might have an end. The November elections saw levels of political participation we haven't seen in over a century. And the recent conviction of Derek Chauvin shows that, at least this one time, the criminal legal system can produce a small measure of justice. But at the same time, we all know that in good times and bad, under Democratic and Republican administrations, in economic booms and recessions, our society is still swamped by a tide of injustice. There's economic inequality that has only become worse during the pandemic. There's racism, a problem that has reached pandemic proportions on its own. And there's the day in, day out cruelty of an inhumane criminal legal system. All of you are helping in the fight for justice, dignity, and equality in the criminal legal system. Some of you defend people who otherwise would not have lawyers. Some of you fight for urgently needed policy changes. You talk to your friends. You post on social media. You came here this evening, and many of you have donated financially. If you've made a donation to the Southern Center this year, I thank you. If you're considering donating, let me just assure you that you'll never find another organization with so many people who work so hard, who have so much impact on the lives of so many, and who remain true to the core principle of treating everybody as a human being who deserves respect and understanding. I hope that next year we'll be able to gather in person, and I hope we'll be able to eat cake together. Until then, good night.
Thank you, James, and thanks again to all of you for attending tonight. Don't forget that everyone who makes a donation by midnight Eastern tonight will have an opportunity to win a trip to Paris, France. The winner will be announced tomorrow. Enjoy this song by Caroline, Karima, and Paige as we bid you farewell. Good night.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out and move mountains. We gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up high like the waves, and I'll rise up in spite of the ache. I'll rise up and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up high like the waves, and I'll rise up in spite of the ache. I'll rise up and we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you. When the silence isn't quiet and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe, and I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll bring the world to its feet and move mountains. Bring it to its feet and move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, and I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up and I'll do it 1,000 times again. for you, for you, for you. All we need is hope, for that we have each other, for that we have each other, and we will rise, we will rise, we will rise. Whoa, whoa, we'll rise, and I'll rise up high like the day, and I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again, and we'll rise up high like the waves, and we'll rise up in spite of the ache, we'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. Oh, oh, oh.